Our guest speaker is Cesar Gracias. He's the chief of ETSU and a personal friend of mine.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Sheriff, so much for allowing me this honor. It's very humbling to have the opportunity to come and speak to my friends here at Hawkins County. As you can tell from my name, I'm not from around here, right? I'm not from around here, but I do have some ties, very close ties to Hawkins County, and I'll share that with you. But there's something that I want to read to you before I get started. It's just a brief article that actually came out 16 years ago. It's called When God Created Police Officers. When the Lord was creating police officers, he was into his 6th day of working overtime when an angel appeared and said, "You sure are doing a lot of fiddling around on this one." Must have been a southern angel. And the Lord said, "Have you read the specs on this order? A police officer has to be able to run 5 miles through alleys in the dark, scale walls, enter homes the health inspector won't touch, and not wrinkle his uniform. He has to be able to sit in an undercover car all day on a stakeout, cover a homicide scene that night, canvass the neighborhood, canvass the neighborhood for witnesses, and testify in court the next day. He has to be in top physical condition at all times, running on black coffee and half-eaten meals. And he has to have 6 pairs of hands." The angel shook her head slowly and said, "6 pairs of hands? No way. It's not the hands that are causing me problems," said the Lord. "It's the 3 pairs of eyes an officer has to have." She said, "Is that on the standard model?" The Lord nodded. 1 pair that sees through a bulge in a pocket before he asked, "May I see what's in there, sir?" when he already knows and wishes he'd taken that accounting job. Another pair here in the side of his head for his partner's safety. And another pair of eyes here in front that can look reassuringly at a bleeding victim and say, "You'll be all right, ma'am," when he knows it isn't so. "Lord," said the angel, touching his sleeve, "why don't you just rest and work on this tomorrow?" The Lord said, "I can't. I already have a model that can talk a 250-pound drunk into a patrol car without incident and feed a family of 5 on a civil service paycheck." The angel circled the model of a police officer very slowly. "Can I think?" she asked. "You bet," said the Lord. "It can tell you the elements of 100 crimes, recite Miranda warnings in its sleep, detain, investigate, search, and arrest a gang member on the street in less time than it takes 5 learned judges to debate the legality of the stop. And still, it keeps its sense of humor. This officer also has phenomenal personal skills. He can deal with crime scenes painted in hell, sorry, my phone is a little crazy here. I apologize. Coax a confession from a child abuser, comfort a murder victim's family, and then read in the daily paper how law enforcement isn't sensitive to the rights of criminal suspects." Finally, the angel bent over and ran her finger across the cheek of the police officer. "There's a leak," she pronounced. "I told you that you were trying to put too much into this model." The Lord replied, "That's not a leak. It's a tear." "What's a tear for?" asked the angel. "It's for bottled up emotions, for fallen comrades, for commitment to that funny piece of cloth called the American flag for justice." "You're a genius," said the angel. The Lord looked somberly at the angel and said, "I'm no genius. I didn't put the tear in his eye." Now, when you think about that, there's a special bond that we have with law enforcement officers, regardless of where you come from. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm not from around here. I'm from a little bitty island in the middle of the Caribbean. It's called Puerto Rico. If you haven't been there, don't go. Don't go. I can tell you from experience, but this is where it gets interesting. It was about 1993, and I'm glad that Lieutenant Larkin is here. I learned a very valuable lesson, and what the sheriff was talking about, the professionalism of the Hawkins County Sheriff's deputies, I can attest to it. I was a young officer. We get a call that Hawkins County had an arrest warrant that they needed to serve. They have them meet me up at, it was Chadwick Apartments at the time. I knew the zone well. It was my zone. I was young. Man, I was just like some of you young guys here. Now, that was a long time ago. I had hair back then, and trust, I was better looking too, and a little bit leaner, right? I had a baton that I had nicknamed My Amigo. He was my amigo. So Officer Larkin steps out, young guy, comes up to me, and we get to talking. He starts sharing me the information that's on the arrest warrant. He tells me about this guy. He said, this guy has a tendency to fight. And, through that conversation, we had a bond, and I thought to myself, I'm not letting anything happen to this Hawkins County deputy before he leaves here at Kingsport. So we go inside, we knock on the door, a lady comes to the door, he tells her what we're there for. She calls her husband down. He comes down, and all I see is this gentleman. He's about 6'3", 6'4", as he's coming out. I'm just looking straight up, big old thick guy. And at that time I thought, well, that Hawkins County boy's gonna have to take one for the team, man. I don't think we can deal with this guy as it is, right? He was irate, very furious. His children were there. They were crying and screaming, please don't take daddy. And the way that it's set up, because it was his call, he is the contact officer, so he does all the talking. I'm the cover officer, I'm just standing behind him. So I go ahead and draw amigo out, and I just had it behind my back because I thought, first time you lay hands on him now, we're gonna have to have a little discussion about this. This is where I learned my lesson. Again, young, I was born in Puerto Rico, I grew up in South Florida, so it's a little bit different than the mountains of Tennessee, but I will say this. My wife is from Tennessee, both my daughters are from Tennessee, so I'm a Tennessean. I've spent more time here than I have anyplace else. Greg started, I hope it's okay for me to refer to you as Greg. Greg began to speak to this guy in a calm, soothing voice, and I'm just waiting for him to step out of the way. I'll be honest with you, I was ready to go. And I remember him saying something that just, it blew my mind. He said, why don't we have your wife remove the kids? And as soon as a lady got those two children, went up the stairs, this guy calmed down. He was a completely different human being. And I looked around and I was like, well, that's how you're supposed to do it. See, I was used to, I'd get on the radio and call a Signal 13. I'd have 6 to 7 officers at my disposition within 1 or 2 minutes. In the county, it's a little bit different. And a lot of times people take for granted what county deputies do, the resources that you have. You don't have the manpower and things of that nature that your metropolitan departments do. And that to me has always been something that has stuck with me. The way that he dealt with that gentleman, dignity, courtesy, respect. It blew me away. And not that I was rude. I've been raised right. I knew how to treat people, but I had never dealt with a situation like that. And that has been with me now. That's been 30 years. I've been in law enforcement 31. I was a young buck back then. As was Greg. Some have aged better than others, right? But that lesson that he taught me about the camaraderie, you know, and just how to deal with people, I wouldn't have learned it any other place. And again, we had a great program, great training program at Kingsport. It was just a different twist that he put on it, and that stuck with me. When I left, you know, I went from Kingsport to the TBI, and then I ran the police academy. That's a story that I try to share, or I tried sharing while I was there. And it's something that it strikes to the heart of what a Hawkins County deputy is. You guys are fortunate to have these men and women that are willing to serve you. Not only Hawkins County sheriffs, but as well as Rogersville and the surrounding cities. Now, this is the last thing that I want to talk about. You know, if you walk around and you look at a tombstone, you'll see a person's birthday, then there's a dash, and the date of the death. For the most part, I think we've always seen that, right? And a lot of times that's all we see. Here's the important thing, and this is a challenge not only to the law enforcement officers, but also to the people that are here. You will be remembered by that dash. In other words, that dash stands for the life that you lived, who you served, how you loved. My challenge to you is this: it doesn't matter where you're at today, you can fix that. You can fix that. I've been married 31 years, I've been an officer 31 years. I've made a lot of mistakes. Honestly, I don't know how my wife could deal with me. She's blonde hair, blue eyes, and she's dealing with a crazy Puerto Rican, you know, with an attitude. But she has tolerated me and just has been a blessing to be around. But I have also, there were times when I was a young officer that I was so consumed with this job that I was working every opportunity that I had. Again, back then, we were just scratching to make it by. But I'll tell you something, it's somewhat emotional. The worst words that I ever heard was when my oldest daughter told me, "Dad, you weren't there for me. Dad, you weren't there for me." And that wasn't too long ago. And so we had a discussion, and I tried to explain. I said, "Baby, every time I had a day off, I was trying to make a little extra money to keep a roof over our heads, to pay the bills, to, you know." I didn't understand. She didn't care about that. When you have children, they don't care whether you're a chief or sheriff or you're a lieutenant or a captain. They care about the time that you spend with them. Your spouses are the same way. You've got to spend time with them. And I realized then, I've got to fix this. I can't go back in time. I can't change that. And I remember clearly the first 6 years of her life, I was working every possible second and third job that I could to make ends meet. And I said, no more. No more. And still made some mistakes, but now that I'm a grown man, and we have a second daughter that's a little bit, well, she's 10 years younger, I raised her the way that I should have raised my first one. Now, let me tell you, we've been working on it with my oldest daughter. I'm extremely proud of her. Believe it or not, if you can believe this, Sheriff, I have a daughter that has been accepted into the Ivy League, Columbia University. I'd like to take credit, but for that one I can't. For that one I can't. And I'm sharing this story with you. It's very personal to me because I want you guys to change that dash. And you can start today. You know, for the guys that are here, I started something here a while back. It's called Friday. It's called Flower Friday. Every Friday I'll go get my wife some flowers. And it doesn't have to be a big bouquet. Man, you stop at Food City and pick up a little something. You'll be surprised at how that affects you, right? If your child wants you to go to a ball game, make time. If you have a grandson, somebody that wants you to read him a book, make time, read him that book. Those are the memories that you'll never forget. Those are the memories that I have of my mom and dad. I was just a little bit stubborn, and I was young, and I was eat up with being an officer. And here's the thing, though, we make all these sacrifices, and some even make the ultimate sacrifice, and then you look at their dash. And I've always wondered, I wonder how their family feels, you know, once the person is gone. And we understand people die all the time. We understand that, but unfortunately for us, a lot of times it occurs tragically, and in an instant, you hug your loved one, you give them a kiss, say, I love you, I'll see you tonight when I get home, and we don't make it home. And we don't make it home. And all they'll have to remember is that dash. That dash. So that's my challenge to you guys as officers as well as anybody here. You can fix it. And I will tell you a funny story though. I am a Christian and I'm proud of that, but when I was a young Christian, this is amazing. I was having trouble with a co-worker and it was a struggle. And so I had a mentor. He was a strong Christian man. We'd meet once a month. And so I shared the information with him. I said, hey, you know, here's where I'm at. You know, he was asking me how I was doing. I said, man, you know, this guy, I can't stand him. We're not getting along, blah, blah, blah. He said, Caesar, you need to pray for him. I said, no, Pastor, I don't think you understand, man. He's the one, you know, I'm saying he's the one that needs to be praying, not me. He said, no, you need to pray. I said, all right, I'll give it a chance, you know, I'll give it a try. So, and again, mind you, I was a young Christian, so I prayed for about a month. We met that next month, and he came up, and he said, how's it going? And he said, it's just as bad as it was before. He said, have you been praying? I said, I sure have. He said, what have you been praying? I said, Pastor, I've been praying that God would send fires from the heaven and consume him. That's a true story. Now, he looked at me and he smirked. He kind of smirked and he said, now, Caesar, son, he pulled up his chair, kind of put his arm around me. He said, no, we need to talk. We need to talk. He shared with me, and again, I was a Christian, but the comparison that he made was amazing. He said, look at yourself and look at before you were a Christian, how other people would see you. And then he said, look at the love that Christ had for you. And he was willing to die for you. And that one struck a chord. I'll tell you this, I continued to pray for that man, and here's what's interesting. And again, this is a very personal story. God kept telling me that I needed to ask him for forgiveness. This guy for the way that I had behaved. And I was like, no, God, I don't think you understand. But I said, oh, what's wrong with the pastor? God, you guys don't understand what I'm trying to tell you here. He kept, every time I prayed, he would always tell me, you need to apologize to him. Well, I pulled the guy aside one day and I apologized to him. I said, hey, I need to apologize for the way that I behaved towards you, the things that I've said about you. Now, he didn't apologize back, and it's fine. That wasn't what that was about. I needed to make peace with it. You know what I learned? He couldn't rent free space in my head anymore. I could put it behind me. Don't let it, the whole time that I was all upset and wound up and I'd be at home doing something, he crossed my mind. Do you think he was even thinking about me? No. Now I wish him well. Now we'll never, don't get me wrong, we'll never go out to have us a steak dinner, but I made peace with it. I made peace with it, and he doesn't rent free space in my head. I'm telling you that to tell you this. If you've hurt somebody's feelings, you know what? Pray about it. Ask them for forgiveness as to how you behave, and you'll be shocked. you'll be shocked how that changes your life around. I love you guys. I hope to, hey, by the way, I will be coming back to Hawkins County. I want to be living in Hawkins County temporarily while we build our new house, so you're going to have a crazy Puerto Rican down towards Segonesville. If you get any calls, guys, just don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry, right? I'll be there with my amigo. I still kept him. He's still with me. But thank you guys so much. I pray that God will watch over you and continue to bless you guys that are here, the families that are representing the fallen officers, and of course my deputies. You guys are part of my family as well. I love you guys. Take care and God bless. Thank you.